Bikini Bottom looks like a normal cartoon city at first glance. They've got roads, schools, a hospital, even a mayor cutting ribbons every now and again. But the longer you watch, some things just don't add up. Whenever disaster strikes, whether it's giant worms, swarms of jellyfish, or a weird case of mad snail disease, there's never anyone stepping in to keep order. And yet, we know those institutions exist. There's cops in the city, and the Navy is real. Mr. Krabs himself served in it. Which made me think, if those systems exist but we barely see them, then something fishy is definitely going on here. At first, I thought it would just be a fun puzzle, like discovering who's actually in charge of Bikini Bottom. Is it the mayor, King Neptune, Gary the Snail with royal blood? But after 3 days rewatching episodes and pulling every clue I could find, I realized this isn't just a question of who's in charge. There's a much bigger system at work, one that explains why the town runs the way it does. So, when searching for the culprit that's responsible for these problems, naturally the mayor would be the most obvious choice, right? After all, he's the one that runs the city. That's what mayors do. Except, Bikini Bottom has had more mayors than Squidward has failed clarinet recitals. They also feel less like leaders and more like props that the writers just drop in whenever they need someone to hold scissors at a ribbon cutting. The first and most recognizable is the Green Mayor, who pops up as early as Season 3. In Doing Time, he's there to announce the opening of a bridge that isn't even finished, and in The Great Snail Race, he gives a short speech to kick things off. And that's about it. His role is strictly ceremonial. He would also appear later in Season 6 in a non-speaking cameo. Then in Season 7, things change. Episodes like SpongeBob's Last Stand and Sponge Kano introduce a completely different Mr. Mayor, who is a purple fish with dark hair. Unlike the green one, he actually holds public meetings, one about a superhighway, another about a volcanic eruption, and while he doesn't really offer any solutions for the problems, at least it looks like he's trying to do something. But just as suddenly as he appeared, he's gone, which I think is pretty strange. Then the Green Mayor comes back in Season 8 like nothing ever happened. No explanation, no mention of elections, not even a hint that anyone noticed the switch. And then by Season 12, in Plankton's old chum, we meet Miss Mayor, who seems to have replaced the Green Mayor permanently and is still the one in charge today. Why? I don't know. But at least she actually does things once in a while, declaring Chum Day a holiday and even pulling off heroic stunts to save the town. Compared to the others, she's probably the most reliable mayor Bikini Bottom's ever had. Now, I can hear you thinking, switching mayors isn't strange, right? Cities have elections every few years, but Bikini Bottom itself never mentions any elections. No campaigns, no votes, not even a single campaign poster. Mayors just appear. Like they spawn in every few seasons and everyone acts like it's normal, which is kinda weird. What's also weird is that sometimes their decisions are downright suspicious, especially the Green Mayor. I mean, why would you open an unfinished bridge? You know that this town is full of lunatics, right? But that was nothing compared to what he does in Porous Pockets. He was seen in the crowds of people that begged SpongeBob for money during his short time as a millionaire. That is the mayor of Bikini Bottom begging for pocket change from a fry cook. And don't forget, these are people that steal every bit of furniture from SpongeBob's house as soon as they discover he's no longer rich. And what makes it worse is that whenever disaster strikes, from Plankton's giant death robots to the Alaskan bullworm, the mayor is nowhere to be seen. They just disappear until the next random event. So when you put it all together, the picture becomes clear. Bikini Bottom's mayors are nothing more than figureheads. They look official, they wear the sash, they cut the ribbon, but when it comes to actual governing, they're useless. And that right there is the first piece of the puzzle. The mayor is only a distraction, which means someone else is actually pulling the strings behind the curtain. And that leaves us with the bigger mystery: who is actually in charge? The answer is definitely not the Bikini Bottom police. Half the time they're chasing the wrong guy, the other half they're beating up parking meters for sport.
That guy had no front license plate, let's get him!
The only thing the cops care about is that he doesn't have a license plate. Meanwhile, the car smashing through the buildings is fine? This petty little stuff could get out of hand sometimes, like party pooper pants.
If you're throwing a party, why weren't we invited?
SpongeBob doesn't invite them to his party, so they arrest him on the spot? However, that's just the petty stuff. If we go all the way back to Season 1 in Hall Monitor, we can see how they handle serious business. Two officers trolling Patrick on patrol is harmless enough, but watch how the episode resolves in the end. they manage to surround SpongeBob, aka the Maniacs, but the one who actually ends up in cuffs is Mrs. Puff. The police put the responsibility onto the boating instructor and walk away from the actual source of mayhem, the Maniac himself. Now, some of you might be saying that the police are technically right here. And that's true. Later episodes like Oral Report even quote the statute that makes instructors responsible for their students.
Under Penal Code 26-1, quote, the boating instructor is responsible
for any minor delinquent actions under that teacher's care.
But come on, SpongeBob was running wild long after class. The cops didn't want to solve the problem, they just wanted someone easy to blame. And they're also pretty inconsistent with the rules. Remember one time Sandy was arrested for public nudity and someone's in the kitchen with Sandy? Even though the majority of the population is only half-dressed all of the time. Plankton is always naked, Squidward never wears pants while being a cashier, Krabs goes naked during the algae is always greener while actively committing a crime, and nobody catches any of them. They just don't care. Meanwhile, the city's most consistent threats operate with near impunity. I mean, Plankton attempts robbery so often, it's basically a weekly event, and yet he always gets off the hook easily. Krabs is even worse. He commits animal cruelty in Jellyfish Hunter, propaganda in Krabby Chronicle, and illegally dumping grease from the grease trap in Greasy Buffoons, and almost all of it goes unpunished. Which begs the question, is this just bad luck, or is someone actually telling them to act this way? Because if you notice, whenever someone with influence gets involved, suddenly the cops snap back into focus. In Professor Squidward, they finally managed to catch Squidward impersonating Squilliam. But if you look closely, it was Squilliam who set him up. The police just did the paperwork at the end. In Band in Bikini Bottom, the Krusty Krab only gets shut down because the police chief's wife doesn't like fun. The law doesn't matter anymore, it's all about who's pulling the strings. So maybe the police aren't incompetent by accident, they're incompetent by design. A convenient shield for whoever's really running the show. And that's where things get interesting. Because there's one name that outranks the chief, the warden, and quietly sets marching orders for the whole department, the commissioner. And here's the kicker. He only ever appears twice in the entire series, but both times, he looks suspiciously familiar. Hat, fancy suit, same shade of green as our old friend, the Green Mare. Coincidence? Haha, I don't think so. They have to be brothers, or at the very least, cousins. But it's the same bloodline running through both City Hall and the police department at the same time. And once you notice it, the whole pattern clicks into place. Of course the cops look like clowns most of the time. Of course they suddenly get smart whenever Squilliam or the police chief's wife is pulling the strings. They're not built to protect citizens, they're built to be controlled. And here's where the mystery deepens. If the commissioner is pulling strings inside Bikini Bottom, then why is there also a navy? Krabs did mention serving in it.
It's my memory chest from my years in the Navy.
And in Good Neighbors, they literally roll out a tank to fight Squidward's house. You don't build a standing military unless you're expecting a big conflict. And that's when I realized there are nations under the sea that we've never been shown. Which means Bikini Bottom is part of a larger system, one with enemies, borders, and power struggles we've never actually seen on screen. Now, it all makes sense why Bikini Bottom feels so chaotic all of the time. The mayors are ceremonial, the police are clowns, the commissioner keeps everything dumbed down on purpose because the real power isn't even in the city. It's higher, it's national, maybe even imperial. And that brings us face to face with the other forces we've been ignoring this whole time. The monarchy of King Neptune and the royal family. Neptune himself is basically a god-king entity in this show. He can order executions on a whim, he can imprison anyone without trial. Even in the movies, his own daughter Mindy can't stop him without begging for mercy. And there appears to be no legal process or other government body with the power to overrule his decisions. This would fit with his name, being the Roman god of the sea, and would explain why there's no checks or balances to his authority. When God wants to do something, there's no power on Earth that can prevent him from doing it. But then it gets really strange. If Neptune is the supreme ruler of the sea, then what's the point of Bikini Bottom having mayors, police, or a commissioner in the first place? The answer is probably the same as in a lot of real-world monarchies: home rule. Neptune doesn't have time to micromanage every single city under the sea, so he lets towns like Bikini Bottom govern themselves as long as they remember who really sits on the throne. But Neptune isn't the only piece of the royal puzzle, because once you factor in Patrick and Gary, the plot thickens. Patrick should have been locked up a dozen times over. Property destruction, assault, destroying the Krusty Krab on multiple occasions, but the police rarely touch him. Why? Because in Rule of Dumb, we learn he's part of the royal family. Not in line for the throne like Gary, but still a starfish with royal blood. Arresting him permanently would be an insult to the crown. As for Gary, while he has nothing to do with the Bikini Bottom government, it at least explains why he's so intelligent in the first place. It's because he's worthy of a king. When you look at it that way, the whole setup kinda makes sense. Neptune holds the crown, the royals get immunity, and the mayors just play dress-up politics. But that's also where things stop adding up. Because if Neptune really is an all-powerful king, why is there a military at all? Why do we hear crabs talk about serving in the Navy or see tanks roll out during Good Neighbors? You don't need armies and fleets just to keep one goofy town in check. Surprisingly, the clues are everywhere. Think about it. New Kelp City is running independent from Bikini Bottom. Rock Bottom has its own language, its own transport system, even its own culture so different from Bikini Bottomites. And then there's Atlantis, an advanced civilization with technology so far beyond Bikini Bottom that it feels like a different planet. Even the surface world shows up sometimes, like the pirate crew in Sponge Out of Water. The Navy is basically an armed force to maintain balance or dominance in a world full of enemies, not to keep the citizens in line. So after digging through all these layers, what do we actually find? Ironically, this would also strengthen the case of Bikini Bottom having corrupt rulers. Since the royal family is living their lives however they want and basically ignoring everything as long as it doesn't threaten the crown, and the Navy only cares about fighting outsiders, it means local leaders can blunder around however they want. Bikini Bottom is dysfunctional by design. But we still haven't reached the scariest part of the mystery. If the mayor and commissioner are running this as a two-man show, how did they come up with the idea? Or are they just puppets too, pawns in a larger scheme? Okay, let's just say that all this chaos and incompetency was rigged. Then who actually benefits from keeping Bikini Bottom this way? Because someone has to. Remember earlier when I said that plankton and crabs always get away with any crime they've done? Why do you think that is? Plankton is branded as the most dangerous inmate and literally kept in a separate cell. But watch, every time he's caught, he slips out in minutes. Sometimes he's even released early because the jail's too full. That doesn't sound like how you'd treat your biggest criminal. That sounds like how you'd treat a mascot. Someone you want stirring up chaos as long as he never wins. Now, what about crabs? This guy violates labor laws on a daily basis, he overworks SpongeBob and Squidward, pays them pennies, serves rotten food, even kidnaps his employees once or twice. And yet the only time he ever really faces consequences is when he annoys the police chief's wife in Band in Bikini Bottom. And the time he got caught with the stolen Krabby Patty secret ingredient in Patty Caper, but that's only because the police were already on the scene. Even SpongeBob himself, if you think about it. Nobody causes more property damage, traffic accidents, or plain old panic than SpongeBob. Yet the cops don't touch him. Why? Because he keeps the Krusty Krab running. He keeps the money flowing. Neither the mayor nor the police ever really protect the people. What actually stays protected, every single time, are the businesses, the banks, the flow of money. One big clue to this assumption lies in safe deposit crabs. The mayor himself shows up to open the bank. Not a hospital, not a school, or any public place, the bank. As soon as it's opened, what happened? It gets compromised by none other than the greedy Mr. Krabs himself, and in one of the most stupid ways possible. You would think that someone who broke through bank security would get sent to prison, or at least heavily fined. But not here, they just kick Mr. Krabs out the door, they even give him his deposit back, with interest. And what about the Bargain Mart, the Chum Bucket, and yes, the Krusty Krab? They're part of the food chain that keeps Bikini Bottom running. Krabs gets away with his crimes because he funnels money back into the system. Plankton is kept around because his constant failures make Krabs stronger, and SpongeBob? His chaos keeps the citizens distracted while his work keeps the Krusty Krab profitable. The cycle is just perfect. The corporations feed the government looks the other way, and the city keeps running in circles, poor, chaotic, distracted, but still pumping out money. Which means the real government of Bikini Bottom isn't the mayor's office, or the police, or even Neptune's castle. It's the faceless boardrooms and bank vaults behind the scenes. That's why the mayor can vanish and respawn without anyone caring, and why the cops chase parties instead of criminals. And that's why the city never really changes, because the system is working exactly as designed. And if that feels uncomfortably familiar, well, maybe that's the point. A reflection of how our own governments use figureheads, distractions, and corporate power to keep citizens confused while the real decisions are made behind closed doors. So no, the question was never who runs Bikini Bottom. It's why does Bikini Bottom run this way at all? And now we know the answer. I knew it was a mistake letting those greedy politicians run the government. Now, you know what's also a big mistake? A certain episode that just feels so odd and out of place. An episode where reality itself bends and we start to wonder, is this a mistake? I already broke it down in part 2 of our Solved series, and trust me, they keep repeating the same mistake, just with a different flavor. I'll see you on the next dive.